We're live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second Q&A session for the CivTech Challenges. This is Challenge 6 with Scottish Enterprise. I'm here with Wayne and Sandra today. How are you guys doing this morning?
Good, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, feeling good for this video session today. So, as you guys know, we're live on YouTube. As you can see, we send out the links through Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. But please send your questions to civtech@gov.scot, which is the only mailbox I'll be checking during the live session. So if you have any questions, send them to civtech@gov.scot. Okay, let's. We haven't got any questions just yet, but I have prepared a few, so I will, because I'm quite curious in this challenge as well. So guys, is there a few lines that you want to give first in terms of narrative for the challenge, what your guys' expectations are, and how people should be looking at this challenge?
I think this is potentially something that's so wide, the challenge that we've set. You know, we're setting a big ambition here, and that is to make greater awareness across the world of Scotland as a business destination. So that is massive. How you do that? Technologically, so many options. So I'm just so excited to see what comes in here, because we have no preconceived ideas. We're really just open to how that's achieved.
I would add to that, at the heart of this is, just some background in terms of Scotland as a country has traditionally done very well in relation to its track record of attracting investment, but it gets harder every year. It's a very difficult economic climate in which we operate globally. We have other challenges, obviously, that introduce uncertainty into the mix, like Brexit and the ref and so much. So it's all those factors make it difficult for us to get a message out about Scotland being a great place to invest. And one of the things that we recognise that we need to do is to better mobilise the passion that people actually have for Scotland that exists out there, to be essentially ambassadors or advocates for Scotland as a place to, in this case, visit, but actually we see this as having a much wider potential across the areas, not just around attracting more people to invest in Scotland, but people to visit, to live and work, and also to study eventually as well. So tapping into that passion, that affinity and affection that people have for Scotland is something that we've experienced firsthand. We see that on a regular basis through some of the existing interaction we get through social media. But we're looking for a way to really take that onto a different level, because we recognise that there's a limitation to the way in which we can spend through deploying big, large-scale marketing campaigns, which we don't have the budgets to do that globally. That's not an option for us. So we're looking to utilise the networks that we have out there and the goodwill that exists globally towards Scotland to effectively be storytellers and message carriers for us.
Mm-hmm. This question was asked as well in the advertising video, but it wasn't asked to you two, so I'm quite curious to see your views on this. Why is CivTech for this? Why choose CivTech instead of going through a normal procurement route?
I think normal procurement routes, you tend to have a solution in mind. So you go out to procurement with a solution, and I think the fact that the Scottish Government is behind this, that we can see that the benefits that's already been achieved from the first CivTech last year, that we were absolutely just so excited to become to join that and try and think of how we could put a challenge forward that really we weren't going through the standard procurement route, that we had a fixed idea that we could say, goodness, just put it out there and can people be innovative and actually come forward with a solution.
And for me, when CivTech's relatively new to me, it's only in recent months that I've become more aware of what CivTech does, and I think the nature of some of the area in which we see the opportunity is, I'm not sure necessarily that there's if there was, I haven't seen it, certainly an off-the-shelf package that does the types of things that we're looking for, and I think it's this is fundamentally about when we talk about invest, we talk about the history and talent and of innovation that's come out of Scotland. So it seems to me to be really appropriate that actually we come to a route like this where we actually tap into some of that talent and some of that capacity for innovation that exists within Scotland to be part of the solution that we're looking for.
Good. question here. What's the current work being done on this? So what's the current process being done by SE staff to sell Scotland as a business destination? So it's the current process out there at the moment.
Well, my role, I work within the Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Development International marketing team, and we've evolved our approach over the course of the last 5 years or so from being a fairly traditional marketing model based around paid activity, paid events, paid advertising through traditional channels, using events and so on. And over the course of the last few years, we've become much more digitally focused. We use LinkedIn very effectively, actually, and that's a great way for us to target our message very, very contextually to reach people in the right kind of sectors where Scotland has strengths, people on the basis of the right geographies in terms of those areas where there's a lot of investment coming out of those areas, for example, in California. So we've shifted our model from that kind of more traditional 20th century marketing model to be much more around digital, and obviously social has been a big part of that as well. I would say that one of the coming back to something I mentioned earlier, a big theme for us is recognizing that it's the challenge is getting harder, and so we are increasingly working not in isolation within Scottish Enterprise and Scottish Development International, but we recognise that across the public sector there are a number of organisations who are actively promoting Scotland as a place to either do business, to invest, or to visit, or to live and work, or to study. And actually, there's an opportunity for us, and we're working on this just now, to be much more joined up and aligned in terms of how we think and plan around how we market Scotland as a nation and as a place to visit, live, invest and work and study. And so there's a bit of work going on, quite a lot of work actually going on in that space, just to ensure that the public bodies that have a role to market Scotland internationally are working much more closely, and also that we're developing a really consistent and I would call it a consistent set of messaging around Scotland and how we want Scotland to be perceived relative to the perceptions that people already have about Scotland.
Yeah. I think this ties in nicely to the next question, which is, who will be the end users of this solution? Is this just for public sector staff, Scottish Enterprise staff, or will citizens be able to access this tool, and even people abroad that would be interested in finding out more about Scotland? Will they be able to access directly whatever comes out of this challenge?
Yeah, I mean, for this challenge to be successful, it has to get out wider than that. It's not predominantly just for internal use. It has to be a network really across the world, not just of public sector employees, even at that point, but actually going out to potential advocates, people that are happy to share their passion, experience of Scotland, and ultimately get that out as wide as possible. So yeah, it's got a vast reach potentially.
Yeah,
I would say as well. I mean, I think there are. I mean, Sandra's absolutely right. I think ultimately this is about a broader base of people. When we think about and some of the thinking we've had around how you tap into advocacy. At one end of the spectrum, we work with people. We have global Scots who are people around the world who are very senior or influential in business and have an affinity for Scotland. They may be Scottish, they may not be, but actually that's a relatively small network. We do work with them on a very close basis, but we recognise that they've got a particular function, but they tend to be, it's quite high value, it's quite specific to sometimes open the doors to get us into companies that we wouldn't otherwise be able to reach, or to help advise companies from Scotland to get access to international markets. So that's one part of the group, user group for this, but actually that's a small part of it. I think we recognise that the bigger challenge around mobilising those networks, and to put it into perspective, we have hundreds of thousands of people who, for example, follow Scotland and SDI on LinkedIn. We have I can't remember the exact figure, but there are tens of thousands of people who follow Scotland or have an affection for Scotland, who follow the Visit Scotland Facebook page. We've got Friends of Scotland, who are people who have an affinity for Scotland, who have signed up to subscribe to feeds from the Scottish Government around things that are happening in Scotland. And then we've got actually, at the moment, I would say untapped networks of alumni, of people who've studied it in Scotland at some point, and they've taken that's given them a passion and experience for Scotland and a passion for Scotland that we do see that, but at the moment it's not necessarily easy for them to see the types of stories or content that actually is about Scotland and is engaging and for them to share that in a way that actually allows them to display that passion to their networks.
I think you touched on a really good point there. That actually, the people who have studied in Scotland, for example, when you look at actually the people that have actually come and invested in Scotland, and we're not talking about high numbers. It's not thousands of people coming to Scotland to set up business. It's more in the kind of hundreds range. So it's a relatively small volume. However, when you look at actually what the decision makers to actually come here, a lot of the points were around somebody's already got experience of Scotland. They have studied here. They have lived here for a period of time. They've got some link. Their auntie was born here. There's something, but there's an affinity there. So they already are aware of that connection. So if that's a big part of the decision maker, that they already know Scotland as a great place to invest, how can we spread that word and get that a wee bit further?
Yeah.
Another part of the challenge I would say as well to recognise this, we focus a lot on the notion of this kind of advocacy, making it easier for people to see, access, and share the stories and the content about Scotland that they would feel passionate about. But another part of this is one of the big challenges that we face, as I say, Scotland in general, when we're competing with other locations. To attract overseas investment, and bear in mind that brings quite often high value jobs and a very important contribution to the economy. When we're competing in markets globally, the big challenge that we find, and it's been established through research consistently, is that people's level of awareness of Scotland as a place to do business is actually quite low. Even in places like North America, where there is a diaspora, there's an association with Scotland, actually we tend to overstate how much perception and how important that actually is. And the challenge that we find from an investment perspective is to get more people in companies that are internationalizing, that are considering expansion into Europe, to actually even think of Scotland at the outset of that process, or to think that Scotland is relevant to their business, to their growth ambitions, and so on. And if we're not top of mind with these people, then we simply don't get a chance to actually pitch for the business. And interestingly, that is, I think that's a core part of the challenge for us, because where we do get a chance to pitch for the business, if we get invited to bid for the business, we're actually pretty good. And we've got a consistent track record of actually securing investment where we've been in the game. Challenge for us is to get more people to think, absolutely, to get more people to think, if I'm going to go into Europe to expand my tech company, then which countries would be top of my list? And that's in essence, that's what we're trying to shift, is to get more people over a period of time to think of Scotland as a business location, so we can attract more jobs here. As
an outsider, I can testify that this is a brilliant place to start your business. It's loads of support, Scottish Enterprise, CivTech, even further down south. There's all these opportunities for young people to take their idea forward and get a bit of support, both financially in terms of mentoring and advice, and take it forward. And you don't see that much at least across Europe. And it's good that in Scotland we have this, and absolutely right, we need to shout at the top of our lungs.
Yeah, I'm so glad you've said that, because you're then our target market for this challenge.
Absolutely.
What can we do to make you to shout about Scotland as a business destination?
Yeah.
That's what the challenge is about.
How do we make that easy for you, and something you'd feel motivated by?
Uh-huh.
Well, I won't solutionize it. So next question we got through is, are you looking for applicants to create different types of content that will be used to promote Scotland as an international business location?
Okay, that's probably quite a straightforward question then. No, we're not looking for content to be developed. We already have content. We're working on additional content. It's more what we're looking for instead of the content is a delivery mechanism for the content, as opposed to the content itself. Right. Do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, I think in the work we're doing behind the scenes in terms of how we position Scotland and that brand building part, I suppose, for Scotland as a nation. Obviously in the current context that's quite challenging given the kind of political environment. But there is a natural kind of position there to articulate Scotland as a great location. We are working on behind the scenes on that content, which actually will articulate what we're trying to get across about Scotland as a modern, dynamic country. So there's content that we will be creating, working with our agencies, our creative agencies based in Scotland. I think there's a second part of all of this, though, which is that there's content that is produced by third parties that actually helps articulate the points we're trying to get across about Scotland, and maybe articulates the stories, and it's engaging for people. So the notion of being able to effectively curate content that actually articulates what we want to say about Scotland from third parties is definitely part of this, but it's not content creation.
Right.
It's facilitation of that curation and to allow us to actually get it out and allow users to actually get that content out and share that content. So yeah, it's not content. We're already working that at a brand level. We recognise there's third party content that can be curated, but as Sandra said, it's about facilitating that sharing of content in a really, really meaningful way.
I think I'll add one question to this one. At what stage will applicants be able to see that content and start picturing how it's going to look in the tool? Would it be something that you could provide now, or at exploration stage, or maybe just at the accelerator stage?
It's a really good question. At the moment, we've just coming to the back end of completing some creative testing work, which has basically meant we've taken out creative work we've been developing over the course of the last 2 or 3 months. We've been doing some testing through focus groups, both with an invest audience, which is obviously a concern of this particular challenge, but also with the overall kind of visit, live, invest, work overall level. And the visit level, and we've just come off the back of testing in London, San Francisco, and New York, which are obviously target markets for us. That process will then mean that we're able to refine the creative work and test, does the messaging actually work? Does it respond and motivate people in the way we want? And I think once we've got that, then we'll be in a position, hopefully, to make that work and available, so we can get a sense of what it looks like and how it sounds and how it feels. So realistically, I think from a timing perspective, that would probably be at the earliest, I would say, towards the end of June, possibly into July, because we've got to do that kind of creative refinement part of the.
I'd say though we will definitely have some content to provide for the exploration stage. We absolutely have to, so that people can go through the exploration stage with that. I was wondering if it's worth expanding on that more to more, at least let people know the types of content, as well as your standard adverts, other sound bites, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we're no different from any other, organisation in the sense that we're testing all the time types of content that people respond to and people want to engage with. So we're all users of social media, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, and the kind of common formats, themes that you'd experience, whether it's as a consumer or someone who's engaged in business, tend to work just as much for a country as they do for a product or for a brand. And so typically in our area, it's obviously videos is increasingly more and more important, particularly video on mobile, but it's short and it's video that people can literally can flick through on a mobile device and see if that's something that speaks to them. It's sometimes it's longer form content in the form of a blog or a story. From a business perspective, we tend to find that depending upon where that particular investor's at in the decision-making process, it can be things like charts and graphs and so on that actually demonstrate in a very rational way why Scotland is a great location to invest as opposed to another location. So it's a mix of different formats and media types. The one thing that's common to it is the element of storytelling, and the sense that and Scotland as a country with our history and our culture and so on has such a rich tapestry and palette to work from, which is fantastic. So so that's a great thing to have. So I don't know if that answers your question. So in terms of format, it really does. It's just look at what's working elsewhere and what people are engaged by.
I think it's something to think about as to when people might access this as well.
Yeah.
Because actually, when we did some research, what we found was that actually when people were looking on our site for information, they're not sitting doing it at a desktop, during their work hours. They're looking at interesting articles that we're putting forward when they're commuting, when they're actually on and maybe the hour journey that they're commuting before and after work. So actually they want to be, in a sense, entertained as well. They want to be informed and entertained, and it's how to perhaps get the messages across in that way as well, to think about really how they'll be accessing the information.
And the point as well about this is that, the traditional model where you have a kind of, a top-down, brand-centric model where you tell people what you want them to think about your product. We recognise that has significant limitations and so on. And what's come through really clearly from the work we've done, and it came through certainly observing the testing we did last week, is that people are much more receptive to information that's been shared with them by someone they know. It has that degree of peer-to-peer credibility and relevance that that makes such a difference, and that's where I think tapping into that passion that people have for Scotland actually is really, really powerful, because people are much more likely to be able to want to open or engage with a piece of content if that content's been shared with them by someone they know, as opposed to from our perspective, from a public body in Scotland that's paying for that content to be shared. So that I think is a key part of this as well.
Just before we go into the next question, I want to remind viewers that if you have any questions, please send them through civtech@gov.scot. That's civtech@gov.scot. Send the questions through and I'll read them live. We have two questions here that I'm going to read both because they're somewhat related. The first one is, can you explain a little bit more about what you're looking for the technical solution to do? And the second one, which is somewhat related, is this challenge focused on the technology or the design?
Good question.
That's a tricky one.
Good question. I think I'll start with the technological solution. Potentially for me, it could go down two very different routes, or ideally cover both of them. The first is actually trying to look at insights, buying patterns of people, which isn't so straightforward. It's straightforward when you're buying a car, say, but not straightforward when you're looking to invest a business in a different geography. So looking at those insights of buying patterns and trying to identify who are the potential people in this area that we should be targeting. And the second part is actually thinking about that delivery mechanism of, okay, once you know who you want to target, how do you then get the right content in front of them? And potentially, how do you then link anyone they already know in their network that could be an advocate for Scotland? So I see that there's two potentially very different technical solutions. Ideally, if you covered both, fantastic, but we'd look at either or in its own right as well.
Yeah. Anything to add, Wayne?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. We've talked a lot about the notion of being able to tap into that advocacy potential and so on. But a key part of this as well is, I mentioned earlier about in order for us to compete, we first and foremost have to get people to think about Scotland as a place that's relevant to their business needs. But we also have to have, ideally, a way in which we can identify as early as possible any early indications or signals that people are sending out that they're actively coming to the point where they may have a defined need where Scotland might be part of the solution. So, it's something that gives us that. I think the phrase we've used in the past is, what are those kind of digital breadcrumbs that exist out there? Those indicators that suggest that someone's actually moving towards qualifying a specific set of needs, starting to demonstrate some kind of search behaviour to qualify a challenge or an opportunity that they're trying to fix, and how can we use those signals, be it the ways in which people are actually engaging in search or engaging with that content that's out there, to identify that those might be people that we would want to engage with more directly and more readily, because they're actually moving into a phase where they may actually have, they're in the right kind of companies, they're in the right locations, they're in the right levels of seniority to actually influence an investment decision, and they're showing the right kind of behaviour. If we could understand, if we had that kind of technology, then our capacity to ensure that we can try and reach out to those people in a meaningful way, or have someone within the networks close to reach out to them in a meaningful way, would I think give us an advantage over over some of our competitors.
But then technology versus design, that's a dead interesting question, because at the end of the day, it's whatever works. But what we do know is that it has to be incredibly easy to use, because if it's not easy to use, then people aren't going to want to necessarily use it. Because what's people's motivation to want to shout about and share about Scotland? So if there's not a strong motivation, like they're not motivated by money, or it's more of a pride thing, and actually having a affiliation with Scotland, then it's more about, okay, well, it needs to be easy to use. So from a technology perspective, yeah, we would obviously like it to be able to integrate with some of our current systems. But yeah, I guess ultimately design and usability is by far more important.
Yeah. And maybe this is a question that you'll have to go back and have a think about. But what are the current systems that this solution would be integrated with? What current software or legacy systems that potentially holds the data currently that this solution would have to tap into? Is that something you're in a position to reply at the moment?
Well, potentially on a high level, we will use a content management system. So for what we're doing, I guess, existing, and we do have a CRM system, Microsoft Dynamics CRM system. So it's at a very high level, but at the end of the day, we have our own technical development team in-house. So if there's a solution that we need to, design something to obviously link the two, then we can do that.
And that's the concept of CivTech. You will be able, the solution that gets through the accelerator stage will have 3 months working with Scottish Enterprise and the challenge sponsors to get it to work, basically. So all of those legacy systems will be introduced to you, and a solution will be reached in consensus with Scottish Enterprise.
I'll just add to that, Rui. I mean, Sandra's obviously mentioned the importance of CMS to this and CRM. I would also say that we've LinkedIn, by nature of what we do to attract investors, is a really powerful channel for us. But one of the limitations with that is we use that to obviously share content and push some of that content out. We use a product called LinkedIn Elevate, which I think was actually listed in the challenge itself, which is great for people who actually work for us for us to curate content and suggest to them content that actually is worth them sharing with their networks. That's great, but that actually, the limitations of that is it only allows us to do that with a limited number of people who work for us, as opposed to the thousands of people out there who we know feel passionate about Scotland in different networks. So there's just to add that to the mix is that obviously that's part of it as well.
Yeah. Let me see if there's anything else coming through. Oh yeah, is there historical data that the companies can have access to on in terms of, I guess the question is focused in terms of historical content, historical stats and data in general that will help promote Scotland, or is this something that is being done now, the collection of this data?
I think it depends. I think we'll have some data types that will be probably useful. I think we've got, we'll probably be able to share, where there are significant groups or clusters of people, for example, the nature of the makeup of, for example, those people globally who choose to follow Scotland or SDI via LinkedIn. We can't, obviously that's anonymized. We can give you a kind of demographic breakdown of who they are, where they are, and so on.
We can also give some analytics around people who are currently interacting with our content as well.
Yeah, and also the types of content, therefore, which actually achieve the highest rates of engagement and so on. But again, it's not necessarily about the content part of it; it's more around the sharing part of it. So it really depends upon which part of the solution you're focusing on.
Yeah. Let me see who else is coming through. Okay, this one. Without solutionizing.
Should I be nervous that you're smiling at this one?
Without solutionizing, let's be careful here. But let's fast forward until the situation where this challenge has been achieved. It's been a successful solution, and we don't know what the solution is. But can you give an example on how someone that is using the solution that comes through will be able to use it to sell Scotland as a business destination?
Yeah, I'll try. I mean, I think I mentioned recently the work we're doing in terms of testing and focus groups to the messaging for Scotland and so on. What really came through from I met with a group in London, and we called them pals because these were people who had either some of them were Scottish, but most of them weren't. They may have worked or lived or studied in Scotland, but they really felt passionate about Scotland. And I think for me, what was really evident was just how strongly they felt that they wanted to do something, they wanted to give something back, they felt this was something they wanted to do. And I think for me, when I think of a type of user or persona, if in my mind, who I would see, it's someone like that. So, there are thousands of people who at some point may have spent 4 or 5 years studying in Scotland and now are active in careers, and perhaps 5-10 years down the line from having left Scotland, they're in quite senior positions in some of those companies. They've got that lasting sense of an experience of what Scotland meant to them. And ideally, I think those are the type of people that we want to be able to reach out to, so that maybe the ask is that if they see something that actually speaks to them, that they can click a button that allows them to click, like, share, comment, and share that with their networks in an easy way. And so doing, I think this is about building, over a sustained period, softer influence, and helping to meet that objective of shifting perceptions of Scotland as a place to do business.
Anything to add on that, Sandra, while I check for more questions coming through?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. When you say, kind of click a button, that again emphasises it has to be something easy, and you could potentially then say, well, it's possibly based on something that someone already has and that they use on a kind of day-to-day basis, or is it something new that they want to use on a day-to-day basis? It could be that way as well. But ultimately, I'm imagining, on a day-to-day basis, people are using their mobile phones all the time, So I'd see potentially, is it mobile technology versus more desktop? Probably more mobile, I would see it. However, if somebody can come up with something completely different that just makes you want to use something on a desktop device more, then that's absolutely fine as well.
And for us as well as a user, I think ultimately we're trying to do this for a purpose. I think it's a good purpose. The purpose is to help grow the economy of Scotland. But what we would ideally like to see in this is a solution that also looks gives us something where we can see and visualise in a meaningful way how people are talking about Scotland across the various different channels and networks, and how people are using the tool, so that we can actually refine and develop that approach. So there's a in my ideal world, one of the users would be someone in back in Scotland who's actually trying to either help identify what the content is, or even recognise those signals from people who are perhaps repeatedly engaging with content that's being shared that actually suggests that they may well be interested in coming to Scotland.
One more here. What are the potential procurement opportunities, I guess commercial opportunities in general, for this challenge after the CivTech proof of concept stage?
That's a really difficult one. I actually think it's pretty broad. I think the thing about this for me is, if you step back from the kind of, this is a technical solution. For me, at its heart, this is about making it easy for people who feel really passionately about something that means something to them, be it a brand, a country, or it could even be a sports team, or a band and music or whatever. If this is something that allows them to really feel empowered to be an advocate or an ambassador for that particular thing, and it makes it easy for them, I think the potential commercial around that is really, really quite significant. Especially if you can do that where it's pulling in the different, it's working across multiple different channels and social media brands. So I don't think this is something which is limited particularly to the public sector and limited to inward investment. this is about tapping into people's passions and allowing them to actually participate in that. So I think the commercial possibilities could be really significant behind this.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, it goes so wide, the potential commercialisation of it, when you do look at what people's passions are. However, even as a starting point, just looking at Scotland alone, we're trying to work with other public sector organisations to see how we can do things better together and collaborate. And a platform like this would be fantastic for so many public sector bodies to actually pull together and use that collective messaging on a system like this. So I think there's an immediate commercialisation opportunity out with Scottish Enterprise, but just with across Scotland to really enforce what message we're giving about Scotland.
And it's never a bad idea to have Scottish Enterprise as a partner. I don't have any questions coming through right now, guys. Is there anything you'd like to add that you feel that we didn't touch on it enough?
I think just, please come forward with your questions. We are very appreciative that this is a very wide open challenge. There's no preconceived idea in mind. So if you've got any questions at all, if you've got any hints, then we're really open to taking additional questions, meeting up with people. So please come forward. Good.
So we'll give it a couple of minutes while I close this up. So if any questions come through to civtech@gov.scot, I'll read them out still. But going forward, the challenge is on Public Contract Scotland. It's also on our wiki page. You can send any questions via the PCS portal. You will have to register on PCS, register your interest, and then you can send any questions, and the guys from Scottish Enterprise will get back to you as soon as they can. Thanks very much, guys. It's been really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes through. I think this is one of the most open challenges that we've had. So it really gives room for creativity. And because it's a subject that it's got so much to be explored, I think I'm really looking forward to see what comes out of this. So,
likewise, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. We didn't have any questions coming through, but if we do, we'll get back to you either way. We have another live session this afternoon with NHS for Challenge 4. That will start around 3 o'clock, so join us then. Thanks very much. My name is Rui Cardoso. Wayne and Sandra, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.